Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. What I'd like to do to start the program is a 5-minute video clip which was taken on June 14th at Runnymede. And we recorded many talks and many presentations. And I think this one gives a flavor for what was the programming that they had over there. The speaker is the Honorable Philip Hammond, who is the MP for Runnymede, very active in the local community, and was with us in November of 2010 when we did the launch event, and he happened to be my luncheon companion at the table. In his spare time now, he is the Foreign Secretary for the United Kingdom. So if we could, we'll play this quickly.
Colleague, our MP, Mr. Philip Hammond.
Derek, thank you for that. And John, thank you so much for coming today and doing us the honour of unveiling this fine statue. And it falls to me just to say a few words of thanks to all those who have been involved in this mighty endeavour, in whichever way. Those who conceived the project in the first place, those who've been involved in the commissioning, the fundraising, indeed those who have generously donated towards the cost of the project, and of course James Butler himself, who performed the not inconsiderable task of actually creating this fine statue. It struck me this morning that there might, to some people, appear to be something slightly incongruous in celebrating the 800th anniversary of the curtailing of the power of the monarch by unveiling a statue of the monarch. Not at all, because while John represented arguably the worst of monarchy, Queen Elizabeth II represents undoubtedly the best of monarchy. And the development of our monarchy from King John to Queen Elizabeth represents the evolution of the principles of Magna Carta from those early days. While John exercised arbitrary power, Queen Elizabeth is the embodiment of the laws that protect our rights. She represents the ultimate refinement of the principle of constitutional monarchy that has served the UK so well. I was reminded of the second verse, the not terribly well-known second verse of our national anthem, which goes, for those who don't know it, "May she defend our laws and ever give us cause to sing with heart and voice, God save the Queen." The Queen is now the embodiment of the principles of Magna Carta that her ancestor, King John, so reluctantly conceded to us. And in 2015, of course, the threat to our citizens was arbitrary power of kings. But down the centuries since 2015, the threat to our liberties has come mostly not from kings, but from politicians of one hue or another. And a democracy with a constitutional monarch defending our laws has proved to be the most resilient bulwark against such threats. So it is entirely fitting that we should commemorate 800 years of Magna Carta by unveiling this statue, marking the transition of the monarchy from the tyranny of John to the impeccable constitutionalism of Elizabeth II. And it's fitting in another way too, because Magna Carta's influence stretches far beyond these shores. As Dan said, it's arguably Britain's first great export of intellectual property. It inspired the founding fathers of the United States. To this day, the image of Magna Carta is emblazoned on the great doors of the Supreme Court of the United States. But it also informed the development of the constitutions of the countries across the Commonwealth, and importantly of India, the world's largest democracy. And as head of the Commonwealth, the Queen embodies the shared values and traditions of the Commonwealth and indeed the English-speaking world that are enshrined in Magna Carta. And yet, there is yet another sense in which this statue has significance here today. In just a few short months' time, Queen Elizabeth II will become the longest reigning monarch in our history. And given the time it takes to build a statue like this, and to my knowledge, none are underway at the moment, this is likely to be the most recent image of the Queen, statuary image of the Queen, produced before that occasion in September, which represents her becoming the longest reigning monarch in our history. And again, a tribute to the remarkable achievements of her long reign over a period when Britain has changed perhaps more fundamentally even than during the long reign of her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria. So once again, heartfelt thanks on behalf of the people of Runnymede, to you, John, to you, Dan, to everybody who worked so hard, so tirelessly, and had so many sleepless nights, making sure that this project has come to fruition here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, there were a great many speeches that were been given during the period we were there. He's an exceptionally impressive man, and I think addressed an issue which has been sort of lurking in the sense that the royal family participated 100% with these celebratory activities and with the 800th anniversary. And that gives some sense that, of cooperation. He was followed by the Sheriff of Surrey Council, who is an official representative of the Queen, and expressed the Queen's pleasure in the fact that the statue was placed. Members and guests of the Clinton Presidential Center, I am honored to speak to you today concerning the Magna Carta at 800. As the Chancellor of the National Society Magna Carta Dames and Barons, I deeply appreciate your hospitality, as I am delighted to share the Magna Carta story. Thank you, Director Gardner, for your introduction, and I thank Mr. Thielheimer for meeting me at the airport and providing a brief tour of your extraordinary Clinton Library. I look forward to spending more time in this state-of-the-art museum experience. And at this day, as we're working to explore ways of sharing an iconic document and its history, the expertise of the museum professionals has become extremely vital. I appreciate the continuing commitment of the Arkansas Division of the National Society Magna Carta Dames and Barons for many years, and this is my second visit to Arkansas. I am the Chancellor of the National Society Magna Carta Dames and Barons, which is a lineage-based society instituted in 1909 with a requirement that descent is established from one or more ancestors present at the field of Runnymede in support of the Magna Carta. I became Chancellor in 1989. There is no specific list of members of the baronial army, and we have an ongoing project to identify them. However, 25, actually 17, of the sureties are the ancestors of many descendant immigrants to America during the years before the American Revolution. We are familiar with the ancestry of over 1,000 immigrants, mostly during the period leading up to the American Revolution. We have over 17,000 current members and have about 5,000 lost members, some of whom may be deceased. Lineage-based organizations provide incentive to learn about your ancestry, which makes history more personal. The members of our society meet in divisions, chapters, and colonies with presentations concerning Magna Carta. We encourage friendship and fellowship and focus on Magna Carta. We have maintained modest enrollment fees to encourage awareness, and the hand-painted membership certificates are generally framed in members' homes and provide a multi-generation reminder of Magna Carta. We welcome participation by partners who share our interest in Magna Carta without the need to establish an ancestral connection with the barons. I recently returned on Monday from 13 days in England, and which centered on June 15, 2015, the 800th anniversary of the sealing of Magna Carta. Actually, members of our society for some time have expressed interest in going on the tour, and we ended up with 107 members and guests who traveled to Runnymede for the anniversary. June 15th was an exceptional day. And some of the people who were there for the celebration, the Queen and Duke of Edinburgh, accompanied by the Princess Royal and Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, visited Runnymede on the occasion of the 800th anniversary, and were received at Runnymede Meadows by Her Majesty's Lord Lieutenant of Surrey, Dame Sarah Goad, the Duke of Cambridge, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Lord Dyson, Master of the Rolls, who's chairman of the Magna Carta Trust, the Right Honorable David Cameron, Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Philip Hammond, MP, Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs and Member of Parliament for Runnymede, and the Mayor of Runnymede. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, accompanied by the Duke of Cambridge and the Princess Royal and Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, listened to a choral performance and speeches delivered by the Master of the Rolls, the Prime Minister, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, and met representatives from organizations associated with the event. And I was pleasantly surprised and honored to be one of those representatives who had an opportunity to meet the Queen. After the brief remarks, we can go into more detail about this extraordinary trip, which the accomplishments of the British this 800th anniversary year have been inspiring and frankly awesome. I have a Google search set for Magna Carta, and there are daily programs and exhibits. The British government gave the Magna Carta Trust £1 million for the programming and £1 million to a group of eminent scholars for research, and those scholars have been writing books about their conclusions. The Magna Carta is current today. We need to defend its application. As recently as 2008, our United States Supreme Court applied the Magna Carta to uphold habeas corpus petitions for Guantanamo detainees in Boumediene versus Bush. In that case, a commentator observed that under Justice Kennedy's opinion that the review is less about prisoners' rights than the judicial power to check undue use of executive power. Is that opinion being eroded today? Today, this morning, I read in the internet versions of The Economist, which were dated tomorrow, that 8 justices voted to reverse the ruling in another Supreme Court case where Chief Justice John Roberts pointed especially to Clause 28 of the Magna Carta, which specifically protected agricultural crops from uncompensated takings. The colonists brought the principles of Magna Carta with them to the New World, he wrote, and had them in mind when they drafted the Fifth Amendment. At our Society's 2013 Washington, D.C. dinner, Ambassador Phillips made the distinction between the North and South Americans as Magna Carta cultures based on Magna Carta values or not. There is a fundamental expectation grounded in Magna Carta that individuals are entitled to basic human rights. Many countries do not share that and accept to varying degrees that within their cultures the leaders have the power and are not really restrained by any laws. I believe it is safe to say that we have a responsibility and mission to share our beliefs while respecting the rights of those who might disagree. We have a global audience and hopefully will provide content which will resonate and embolden individuals to assert their rights, primarily through the use of a website which has hundreds of hours of video and thousands of pages of content. I would submit that the Magna Carta is an important foundation for all forms of free expression. whether in sharing points of view or arts. A significant result from the Magna Carta of 1215 was the acknowledgement that kings are answerable to the law made by men rather than only to God. Whether that is actually accepted by leaders and especially tyrants of our modern world is open to questions. But today's technology provides method of communication which are in process of reaching all peoples and the lessons of Magna Carta. This June has been a special time for the Magna Carta as we experience June 15th of the 800th year. By agreeing to Magna Carta, the king acknowledged that the king is subject to the law. By allowing a precedent to be established under common law, he embedded the rights of Englishmen, which enabled and emboldened the American colonists to declare their independence. Explaining a little bit more about the grant, a group of scholars in the United Kingdom from East Anglia University were given a grant of £1 million, and each of them were given the opportunity to individually publish their findings. In addition, organizations, towns in the United Kingdom were each awarded grants of up to £20,000 as an incentive to recognize the Magna Carta. The Lincoln Castle is in the process of renovation with funding in the amount of £22 million. Salisbury Cathedral renovated its exhibit of the Magna Carta with funding in the amount of £500,000. The development of the Interpretive Center at Lincoln provides an educational destination for every school child in the United Kingdom. Most of the funding for these projects has been public, and I have been especially impressed by the Lincolnshire County Council, who have provided the financial resources to provide education. They have taken the same approach with the University of Lincoln. They have a thriving community as a result. Salisbury was especially creative when they displayed the cover of Jay-Z's album for a time next to the Magna Carta. His 2013 album, incorporating the name Magna Carta, developed awareness in a wider constituency, and I was told by Salisbury that he was good to them. The 800th Anniversary Committee has a wide audience this year, and I am particularly interested in providing a legacy so that the anniversary is remembered in the future. Our tour this year has provided some exceptional video which will be presented on our website. These include June 15th at Runnymede, the Magna Carta Festival at Runnymede and Egham, to view Magna Carta exhibits in London and Faversham, as well as visiting Canterbury. Sir Robert Worcester, chairman of the 800th Anniversary Committee, opened his home, Allington Castle, for high tea. It turned out that one of the participants on the tour was a descendant of the Wyatt family, which had lived in Allington Castle, and is an ancestor of many of our members, a qualified immigrant ancestor. Our society has a group of 200 who were present at Runnymede for the 750th anniversary. This time, our group had luncheon in Bury St. Edmunds in the same place where the group had lunch in 1965. Last year, there was an exceptional exhibit at the Houston Museum of Science, getting back to the United States, and about 100 of our members gathered to attend the opening event. Clearly, the Magna Carta was inspirational for the American colonists as it is today. It provided precedent within common law for the rights of Englishmen, to be oversimplistic. Many of the American colonists involved in leadership of the American Revolution were educated in London. In a recent publication entitled Middle Temple Lawyers in the American Revolution, Lord Phillips in the introduction observed that families of means who had settled in the colonies often sent their sons to study in England, with about 150 studying at the Middle Temple in the 18th century. He observed that by the time of the American Revolution, over 100 American-born lawyers were Middle Templars, including 5 signers of the Declaration of Independence and 7 drafters of the Constitution. The book explores their individual experience. The book and many other studies illustrate that early Americans who gathered together to plan a nation did so with free discussion, although private, among educated people. We can explore that process, but it is hard to replicate the unique dynamic which is experienced when people gather in person. Today, we enjoy electronic media and interpersonal communication. However, it is likely that many decisions are made by personal exchanges. The advantage enjoyed by the colonists was that their presence for the meetings was based on geographical interests rather than political orientation, so they started with a clean slate. We could consider that the colonists were studying and also consider the extraordinary resources in Philadelphia, which could provide an exhibit including the actual books and publications which were used by those colonists during the decision-making process when they worked on the Declaration and the Continental Congress. There have been many books written about the formative experience, and many scholars are embracing the 800th anniversary as an opportunity to explore the history and ramifications from Magna Carta. The challenge today is to continue to provide forums with meetings and conferences, as well as opportunities for publications, so that new ideas and creativity emerge based on the principles of Magna Carta. We should emphasize the importance of inspiration as we strive for individual liberty and the rule of law as components of democracy. One of my objectives is to color code a map of the world with reference to the Magna Carta rights within the 194 constituent countries which are part of the International Bar Association. As I said before, the Magna Carta provided precedent for the American Revolution. The well-educated men who were founding fathers, along with the participants who were motivated by passion or self-interest, more than reason, combined to incorporate historical perspective within the American Revolution. We can start with 1215. Actually, we could start with the Articles of King Henry I. Explore the contrary experience of the Golden Bull of 1222. Study the theories of Sir Edward Coke, and trace the evolving relationships between kings and subjects through the English Revolution and Glorious Revolution. Each step in the process would have been studied by the earlier founders or shared among the founders. An exceptional book titled The Origins of Political Order by Francis Fukuyama, a senior fellow at Stanford University, explores the experience of many cultures. Among the lessons is that the Hungarian Golden Bull of 1222, which he observes some describe as a East European Magna Carta, did not become the foundation of Hungarian liberty. He observed that the early constitution limited the power of the Hungarian kings so well that effective rule was placed in the hands of an undisciplined aristocracy. Without a strong central executive and the power to support an army, the country lost its freedom altogether to the Ottomans in the Battle of Mohawks in 1526. That is one example as he explored the lessons from China and India, as well as the events leading to the French Revolution. There is much study, and we can learn, as did the American colonists. As Americans, we have a responsibility to continue the vision of our ancestors for the nation. For those who are descended from the Magna Carta barons, we have a responsibility to continue to inspire all peoples to embrace the courage of the barons, to not only challenge authority, but also to do so in a way which is responsible. The barons did not seek to kill the king and destabilize the realm. They chose to influence the king. Today, we can influence the world, and the 800th anniversary provides that opportunity. In conclusion, in the interest of time, I will stop and welcome questions. If you wish to have any specific areas, I'd be happy to explore that and provide more detail, including a description of the other activities we did during the tour, and some of the content within Magna Carta. I thank you for your attention and the privilege of addressing you today. Thank you.
Okay, please raise your hands and we'll get a microphone to you. Yes, right over here.
Would you say something about the conversation we had earlier about declaring war and the fact that this perhaps was not so much against the royalty, but the number 2 people who were actually administering the country at the time.
I think that the conversation concerned was it something about, pardon me? Cromwell. I think the Cromwell, the question related to the fact that Cromwell was described the Magna Carta in very uncomplimentary terms. And I think that the reason for that probably went to the fact that the Magna Carta did not seek to destabilize or kill the king, but was a method by which the barons could influence the king to do the right thing in certain areas. So effectively, it was more about the executive authority and the way the executive authority was administered than an attack against authority per se, so that Cromwell might find that very threatening. Pardon me?
Was taxation the issue? Who administered the taxes, how it was used?
That was one of the issues that was involved. I mean, the passionate issues for a number of the barons was the fact that they were Norman and that King John had managed to lose their land, which they found discouraging. The other thing is that the Crusades were quite expensive, and King John sought to tax the cost of the Crusades. But there were also ideological factors, because there were many at the time who felt sympathetic to the King of France, and that had presented an alternative to them, which evolved after the Magna Carta was sealed. So for those who don't know, what basically King John sealed the Magna Carta. It was shortly thereafter annulled by the Pope, and the document of annulment is actually in the British Library exhibit right now. And so at that point, the barons were in many instances turning to the French as a solution to their problems. And then the baronial war continued, and King John conveniently died. When he died, then William Marshall, who was the regent and at the time, basically convinced the barons that they should go and support young King Henry III, who was about 9 years old, which they did, and that shifted the balance of power away from the French, who were ultimately defeated in battles.
Judge Arnold, you had your question over here, your hand up.
In the popular mind, especially when one sees what certain television commentators make of the Magna Carta, there are a lot of personal rights that are important to us that are said to have originated in some sense or other in the Magna Carta, which really are not in there. But what's odd to me is not so much that. I mean, that's the way lawyers operate, right? The life of the common law has lain mostly in the abuse of its elementary principles. We know that. But what is a little odder to me is that what is in there isn't much talked about, and that is that much of the impetus for this document had to do with the illegal exactions, illegal taxes by King John, and also a number of the clauses, as you know, especially in the front of the Charter, have to do with that. And also, the Charter also mentions, and you mentioned this earlier, the habit of the king to take property without compensating people. So that the idea of property as a human right, as it were, is central to the document, and yet this is never mentioned in the popular accounts. Can you explain why that might be?
Politics, perhaps? There's an interesting distinction because the Magna Carta does, does mention certain, certain specific issues. And the Magna Carta of 1215 was shortened by the time it was reissued in 1216, 17, and ultimately in 1225 was the document which was more, which continued basically to the end. Many of the provisions were taken out which were deemed to be irrelevant. They separated out the Forest Charter. The clauses which are still in place include the freedom of religion for the English Church, the rights of London, and two clauses which were combined, basically what we now know as the due process clauses. The right of habeas corpus actually came in later, but it was grounded on the basis of Magna Carta, but it was actually granted afterwards. So it's essentially, but it was interesting that I had there was a talk which was given by Sir Robert Worcester, who's chairman of the 800th Committee, and I'm going to read a paragraph from that, which addresses, says, in Britain, he cites a few mistakes that generally are made by common commentators today, one of which is the fact that, yes, the Magna Carta was sealed, not signed. He also said, in Britain, a few scholars, some history buffs, most pundits, and nearly all editorial cartoonists writing and drawing today seem to make the same three errors of fact about Magna Carta. They say that only 3 chapters are still in law. Nonsense. Dick, he's referring to Dick Howard, counts about 12 that effectively are. I count 16, as he leaves out his list selling widows off in marriage for interests. So it's, there's also a perception that it was basically an elite group of barons who were self-serving. And one of the interesting areas for a study is the many ways that rights are granted to all free men, all men, and basically all the people in the realm. And I think that's an area which needs to be explored, but I think to do it properly, we have to go back to the Latin to see exactly what words were used for each description. But anyway, it's a political, I think the answer is it's political.
Question right here at the back.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, would you address the impact of Magna Carta on the Revolution of 1688, please?
Basically, within the Magna Carta history, and there's a lot of history out there, it would be easy to say that the Magna Carta went to sleep for about 400 years. And Sir Edward Coke, who was a judge during that period in the early 1600s, was a prolific writer and had definite opinions and basically used Magna Carta as a precedent for asserting a number of rights, including the rights of Parliament to be independent of the crown. So I think that's the basics. It's a fun, am I on point there? Am I in the right place?
Well, when James was deposed, they were actually really not replacing a monarch. And so I was wondering if you could address whether that was somewhere in the minds of the Whigs who were substituting William and Mary.
I think it would have been part of their psyche at that point. I think the period I was talking about would have been a little bit earlier when it was revived. And then there was a fundamental belief that people had individual rights and were entitled to explore them, and that gave them a platform on which to operate. But again, I think the last time I looked at that, there was several different versions of history depending upon whether you were Whig or not. But I think it's sort of fundamental grounding for it. Yes, sir.
What happened to the original document, and who has these 4 reissued, I'll call them copies, they're probably not copies, but who has these 4 copies that are in the world?
There are 4 known issues of the 1215 Magna Carta, and I think that's on the handout that I handed out. 2 are at the British Library, one's in Salisbury, and one's in Lincoln, and we saw them on our trip. And it's the one in. We also went to Canterbury Cathedral, and went to a service at Canterbury Cathedral, which was lovely and presided on by the Dean of Canterbury, who gave us a brief explanation to our small group about Canterbury Cathedral. And he made the point that one of the ones in the British Library was actually the Canterbury copy of Magna Carta. So the 4 1215s are the ones I mentioned. There are 2 versions outside of the United Kingdom at this point. One is owned by David Rubenstein and is in the National Archives, and the other is in Australia. The big debate, which has evolved in the past year or two, has been the fact that the Magna Chartas, the known originals, were restricted to 17, which were the issues prior to 1300. And now the academics and historians are emphasizing the fact that the 1300 Magna Carta should be included because they were part of the original series of Magna Chartas, primarily exporting the 1297 provisions to the Cinque Ports. And we saw one on our tour, we saw one in Faversham, which has one of those 1300 Magna Chartas.
Was there an original, a single original that was sealed, and what happened to that?
No idea.
And research has not uncovered whatever happened to it?
I think they were, if you could imagine, I guess they had a big sealing machine. There's an example of a sealing machine at the British Library exhibit. But whether there was an original or whether there were notes that were made by Stephen Langdon or not, but that's a question which comes up from time to time, and it's generally accepted at this point that the only ones that they know about are the 4, and the rest of them have disappeared.
Well, let's give him a round of applause because I've got to introduce BJ. Ted, thank you very much. Now I want to bring up B.J. Walker, the president-elect of the Pulaski County Bar Association, who's going to talk about their new initiative to sell widows off and about how you get credit for being here today.